we will be recording as a team today, though back and half.
Hello, Miss Lady.
TK has dipped, so we got like a small group today. Thought today, good topics would be in line with the scholarships that we just did. We had an open application for Strength Coach Network, and we put out a bunch of questions in the application process to try and see, who would be like most deserving of getting a free year to the site. One of which is 5 most influential coaching books and 5 most influential non-coaching books. So I figured we could have a start with that. JJ, let's pick 3 coaching.
3.
Yeah.
3 of each.
If you reply like some people did in that fucking form that I don't read, or I have read
Harry Potter,
or you can list Harry Potter, we're gonna have problems.
All right, so coaching books would be James Smith, Governing Dynamics, because I think it's pretty much one of the ultimate coaching books there is. Probably the most recent one I've actually read in terms of S&C stuff would be Mladin's Agile Periodization Strength Manual.
Yeah.
And then third one would be Game Changer by Fergus Connolly.
How are you?
Throwing
heat.
Yeah, just the 3 off the bat. Non-coaching would be Taleb, Skin in the Game. I'm rereading that one actually at the moment. I read that a couple of years ago, and I'm like, bro, I clearly didn't know what I was reading 2 years ago.
Yeah?
Yeah. Principles would be there with Ray Dalio. Scott pushed me onto that one, I think, last year. And then... and then it would be probably 0 to 1.
Yeah.
Just as a book, generally, like.
He's a wig. He is.
He is a strange bloke, but
he's a born again Christian gay billionaire, which in Silicon Valley is fairly, and he supported Trump. When Hulk Hogan put Gawker out of business and he got like $100 million settlement for they leaked that sex tape of him screwing his neighbor's wife. It was Peter Thiel that funded that lawsuit to put Gawker out of business because they had outed him years before, and apparently he saw like that thing pop up. There's a movie about it on Netflix. So he paid for all the lawyers. He put the judgment in against Gawker, and they went out of business. True story.
Oh.
Yeah. Zach, what about you, bro?
My most influential book, so obviously probably be corny, but I would say Science of Practice, because I think it's just backbone. I think it kind of goes back into governing dynamics. I think if you read that front to back and understand, I think you're in a pretty good spot for the majority of our profession. For me, it was almost a gateway book. It was a system by Al Miller, Rob Penarello, Alvin Mule, all those guys, because that's a backbone of how I've been taught, how I've learned. Then I would just go ahead and I know we originally defined, I had my 5 right off the bat. I would say Agile Periodization. I'm kind of figuring out, I just finished that one a month and a half ago, and now I'm sifting through it. I've talked to Kira about it, trying to figure that one out. Then Charlie Francis Training Systems. Those are probably my backbones for coaching wise. Non-coaching wise, I would say my first one was probably a gateway book for me when I was in, I guess, high school would be Fight Club. That was a big one for me into like my like pseudo philosophy kick.
Did you see his father get murdered in front of him? Chuck Palahniuk. Apparently that was like one of the pivotal events of him growing up. He saw his dad murdered in front of him.
That was probably one of my big ones. And then Meditations was almost like another gateway book for me by Marcus Aurelius. That was another one for me. And then anything Henry David Thoreau, like I was like on a big like metaphysics like kick in high school and the kind of whatever. So anything on that's like my third one. So I'll just give you an author for that one.
And how did that go down in West Virginia?
The pariah of the holler,
Right, anyway, those books, the training books that you listed, I remember reading those books. He's gone. His internet's gone. Like I remember reading those books when I was in my first year of college, like I definitely read Science and Practice of Strength Training because someone told me to. And I think it was in the first or second year that I read Charlie Francis Training System, and both of those went over my head. And I think it's one of those ones where you read. It's better to read the same book 100 times if it's a really, really good book than read 100 books once. Because I think it's like the mark of a really good book is you pick something out of it every time you come back to it. That was definitely the case for reading Science and Practice. Because the thing that always stuck out for me from that book was they give you the transfer of training index in that book. And I completely dismissed it at the time now, but then obviously you realize, well, actually that's the name of the game. You know, you do X and Y happens. And nobody uses it now, but if you can use it, I think it's a pretty powerful tool to inform what you're doing coaching. He's gone.
Gone.
I'm back.
You back?
Dude, I feel bad. Harlan from previously. Certain days in life. Zach's going out during Cheeky Midweeky. All right. Books.
You can't copy. You have to go original.
This gets a lot harder.
Yeah.
I'll start with non-training. Almanac Naval Ravikant, for sure. That one hit me
The
like
literary slap to the face.
yes. Sat in my office last semester reading a page over and over for the
So
slap.
did I read that before you, even though it was at your house?
Yeah, I like just picked it up and I was finishing another book, and then you speed read it in a day and
Send you the text like, bro.
don't peer over the garden wall.
Yeah.
Economy of Truth, Easy Andre. I think just a lot of good maxims for life that really resonate with me. That's one I've come back to probably 3 or 4 times.
It's pretty ballsy, because he is a qualified lawyer and he was graduating law as he wrote that book, and he's just like, fuck it, I'm not going to be a lawyer.
And had a conversation with him on Instagram the other day.
Oh, yeah.
He is set to release an updated version of Economy of Truth this summer. That's what he's working on. Third non-training book.
The battle.
I would say Thinking in Systems, just because I think fundamentally that's something that everyone in sport should understand.
Have you got my copy of that? One of you boys has got my copy of that.
I bought an original of it.
Probably TK.
Probably. That's why he hopped off. But yeah, I just think understanding systems and the fact that we operate in a complex one when it comes to sport is essential and is far too often overlooked in a very reductionist manner in sport.
What about training?
Bro, the good ones have been mentioned. So I'll go to a distillation of Game Changer instead of Process series, just for the more in-depth look at a lot of the concepts and more applied concepts of Game Changer, which to me was like tantamount to the Bible, the modern Bible of sport preparation. Dude, I'd say Strength Training Manual by Mladen. I think for a lot of the concepts that, especially like the opening parts of the book where he explains a lot of the theoretical aspects of how he looks at planning and programming and just looking at things much more pragmatically than a lot of people tend to do. And then I'll also probably stay on that kick since we've already mentioned some other key like fundamental books and say that his conditioning manual was very helpful for me in just understanding how to be just understanding how to go at conditioning pragmatically and not look at it as like targeting a certain quality, but rather more of a what's it called, form for action.
Yeah.
So looking at conditioning in that light and how to,
even if it's not like 100% accurate, it still informs what to do.
Yeah. And that was very heavily influential on how I did a lot of conditioning at William & Mary and how I look at conditioning now with my team. So I would definitely say those 3.
Happy days. All right. Me.
What's you?
Training. I'll go it must be like 10 years ago now that I picked up MMA. Sorry, is it Ultimate Conditioning for MMA by Joel Jameson? Found it to be highly applicable to rugby, even though it wasn't a rugby book. I think a lot of the stuff in there, like, oh, we're hypertrophying, type 1 fiber, and we're, getting mitochondrial density and blah, 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 blah. Probably not. Probably you're not really creating much change in the chambers of the heart with 1 or 2 sessions a week. But, when you do a lot of LSD work, you get really fit. When you do a bunch of like high resistance intervals without a ton of lactate, you get really fit. So they're just really effective methods. And then also like thinking about how the methods flow, what should be done and when. I think that's pretty powerful book. So that'll be the metabolic. When it comes to the neuromuscular, probably, because we've mentioned a couple of books where it goes over your head the first time you read it. And I'll say Special Strength Training Manual for Coaches by Verkhoshansky is one of those books where, I downloaded off the internet. I think there's like a first translation from maybe the late 90s or early 2000s. And it wasn't really a translation because they had moved to Italy and translated it to Italian, and somebody had translated it from Italian to English. So it was just indecipherable. And it wasn't until 2013 where, thanks to Jay, I got to sit in a room with Natalia Verkhoshansky for 2 or 3 days and see all the stuff applied. And it was like one of those light bulbs when you get to see somebody apply the principles in the book in person. I started to get it a little bit. I'm still figuring it out though. And let me think. So I don't want to say Franz Bosch. I don't want to give him the clout. It's an interesting book. I wouldn't say it's probably one. I wouldn't say it's one of the most influential books I've ever read. I think Speed Trap was. I think it's been out of print, but again, you can get it off the internet. But it's like one of those things where it's not written as a coaching book. It was written for like a mass consumption. It was supposed to be an expose on how basically they cheated the system. He also broke the world record, but it's just one of those things where what I think is fucking mind-blowing is, let me think. I want to say when Charlie Francis coached Ben Johnson to break the world record, he was 32. So there was a gap of 5 years between Ben Johnson and Charlie Francis. So he coached somebody to run 9.79 in the 80s as a 32-year-old. And he had no formal training whatsoever. So it's like his ability to like sift the bullshit and figure out what works, and a lot of stuff that he was doing 35 years ago. Yeah, 35 years ago. There are people typically in football now that still don't get it. If you tried to do that stuff in football, people's heads would explode. Be like, oh, you just set a PR. Okay, take a break. Or like, we're done for the day. Or, 2 minutes between 10-yard sprints, stuff like that. Just a lot of stuff that flies in the face of conventional thinking. He was doing it 35 years ago. Let me think. Non-coaching. Anti-fragile, I think, is one of those things where, well, I'm going to say the whole series, like that Inserto series, because it's really hard to pick between the books, because reading one book will kind of like force you to pick up another book in the series. So the first ever book that I picked up of him was actually Fooled by Randomness, but it's like you're forced to realize just how terrible humans are actually seeing data and information as it is and making accurate predictions and not being swayed by emotion, all that kind of stuff. And then you're like, well, fuck, what do you do with that? How do you factor it into your decision making? How do you account for things that are going to go wrong and stuff like that, which I've tried to incorporate a lot into the problem solving module of the long form course, which is being released next week. Plug.
By the way,
link in my bio.
What's that?
Without you shamelessly trying to make more money, I was just going to say I rewatched his module for the 3rd time today, and I still think it's better every time I watch it. So you want to look it up and go buy it.
Appreciate it.
From my bio.
You can fight over it. Let me think. I just really like the book God Is Not Great, How Religion Poisons Everything. I'm just out myself as a closet atheist in American football. So goodbye, NFL. I think it's just a really powerful book because it just picks apart everything. You know, you could, like, if you grew up in England, you're probably going to go to Church of England school. You're going to have all that kind of like stuff built into your life. And it makes you question everything around you. You're like, what the fuck? And yeah, I think when I read that book, it kind of like ticked up. The clock is running. You might as well fucking get to it and get busy. And I think I said that on a podcast once. Like, the overwhelming feeling I had when my son came out and I held it was like, oh, there's no God. But it didn't matter. It didn't matter. What other books? What do you think? I'm trying to be original here. Fuck.
Just had Thinking Fast and Slow come to mind.
Thinking Fast, Thinking Slow is a very good book. I think it kind of like, I think Nassim Taleb borrows a lot of his ideas. JJ had 0 to 1.
Principles and
that's tough. I mean, it does sound corny, but the 4-hour work week was really influential when I read it. I was in my second year of working at London Wasps. So that would have been the year where I basically earned $5,000 below the poverty line. And I remember I was working at another club where they'd stiffed me on the money. So I was getting like $4,000 for the entire year. And it just turned out to be like a shit time at the club. I was not learning anything. And I was like, listening to the 4-hour work week. And it's like, yeah, Pareto, 80% of your problems are going to come from 20% of what you're doing. And I just added up the hours that I was at this other club. And I was like, right, that's what my problems are. So they'd given me this opportunity to like acquire experience and blah, blah, blah. And I just walked in there mid-season. I was like, I'm not doing this anymore. And they were like, why? And I'm like, basically not learning anything, not enjoying it. This is where most of my problems come in. And I'm going to double down and focus on other wasps. And I got a job at the end of the year, so maybe it paid off. But I think it's probably a little bit overly simplistic, and it's kind of catchy with the marketing of like, oh, you only have to work 4 hours a week. But it's one of those things where it just reinforces like how powerful outsourcing, automation, being super focused in your activities can be. And I think that's one thing that I've really tried to do in is it 6 months since I left work? Yeah, 6 months. I'm really trying to focus, double down, refusing, for example, I don't do any online programming anymore. I say no to a lot of stuff, turned down an opportunity to do some work this week. So it's one up by Team Builder.
by Team Builder.